Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this simple landscape with some fun little flowers in the front using some simple materials. I'm going to be using gouache, titanium white, and the paper I'm going to be using today is a little different than I normally use. Today I'm going to be using the Strathmore paint paper, which is 100% cotton paper. I wanted to be able to use that paper today because I'm going to be creating more of a wet on wet technique. I'm going to have a lot of paper or water on my paper, so I wanted to have something that was going to be able to tolerate it easier. Now you can create a similar look not using 100% cotton, get that right, 100% cotton water paper. You don't need it necessarily, but you're just going to have to move a lot faster. I'm going to have a lot more open time with this paper, and my paper is not going to buckle as much by using this. There, I got that all out. Now today I'm also going to be taping my paper down. I'm going to be using the magic Scotch tape. Before you use this, you want to pull it out, measure it on your paper, and then put it on your clothing to give it a little bit of fuzz. So when you put it down on your paper, it's still going to hold the line, but when you go to remove it, it's not going to be as tacky. Well, let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with the watercolor look. I'm just going to be using a clean water on the top of my my paper. I'm going to be creating the sky first. So when we do a little bit of a landscape, we want to kind of think in thirds, like a third, and a third. So my sky is going to be up higher, my midground is going to be in here, and then my foreground is going to be in this area. So I'm going to be starting with clean water, and I'm going to be wetting my paper, and I'm going to be going at least a third down. Sometimes you have to get off to the side to see if you really are getting the water onto your paper. You're going to want to be able to see a little bit of puddling on here. I want a nice juicy surface to work on. So not a ton of puddles, but I still want to see it fairly wet. All right, for my sky, I'm going to be using a blue and a purple, and I'm going to be creating kind of a grayish, purplish sky. So I'm going to be using a color that's called Sky Blue. Today I'm using my Paul Rubens colors. They're kind of considered more of a professional grade of watercolor. But that doesn't really, use what you have. I'm a firm believer, use what you have. With watercolor, you just need to practice, learn how your paper works with your water. The watercolor and go from there. Now I have kind of this darkish purple. I'm going to pick up a little bit of Payne's gray as well, which is over here, I believe. Hopefully I'm heading the right direction. Yep, it's kind of a grayish blue. I want to kind of gray that color down a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. Now my paper is still fairly wet. Now if you're using a paper that isn't 100% cotton, I'm going to make this picture, turn this picture around a little bit more. If you're using a paper that's not 100% cotton, you would want to mix your color up first and then wet your paper so you're ready to go. Now when I'm coming in, I'm just going to be streaking this across the top. The top part of your sky is always darker than the bottom. So as your paper goes down, whoa, and I picked up a bright blue there. When your paper goes, or your sky goes down, you're getting lighter. So I'm just adding in this color and getting lighter as I go down. I've got a pretty good amount of color up here. Watercolor is going to dry slightly lighter when it goes on. I'm having a hard time with my words today. Okay, so we have pretty good amount of water. Now I'm going to be picking this up and I'm going to be tilting it a little bit and creating this kind of a cool atmosphere look. So my water is going to move around a little bit more on my paper, and I'm going back and forth. So you can see how and why I wanted a little bit more water on my paper. Now at this stage, I'm going to take some toilet paper, the cheaper the better, and I'm going to wad it up lightly, and I'm going to come in and tap a few clouds into my picture. Now this is easy sometimes to get carried away with and we get too many, but tap it in there and then take a look at what you got. Stand back a little bit from it, take a look. You can soften it by coming in with a little bit of water to kind of dab out some of those maybe too round of shapes. You can add a little bit more water to make it a little bit more wet to soften those up. And again, you can come in, add a little bit more. Now see, you can see how that even popped brighter white. I'm just lifting my color. It's kind of a fun look, actually, to have that line where it's moving and the water is going to run a little bit and create kind of a fun atmosphere look. Now I'm just going to let that be and not touch it anymore. Often is sometimes you work it and then you work it too much. Now I'm kind of sitting at the center of my paper and I'm going to want to solve that. So I'm going to come in with a bluish green. My colors in this background here, the greens, are going to be more blue because they're going to be a cooler color. They're farther away. So I'm going to start with a bluish green. And when I'm in this area, I'm going to come in and I'm going to just tap it on here. I want a little bit thicker of a color. I'm going to show you how to kind of get a loose tree line or a fuzzy tree line. So I'm going to be popping in a little bit darker of a color in my background. Come in here and lay in a little bit on this area here. So these are going to be my darker greens. Now once I have my color in there, I'm going to take my little spray brush, or not my spray brush, but my little spray bottle, and I'm going to give these a squirt and create these little bit of a soft tree line. Now I've got a lot of water on there. You can pick up a little bit of your water by taking a dry brush and coming off here and just tapping this a little bit and picking it up so you don't have such a big puddle on the end here. Now again, this is going to dry a little lighter than what's showing here. All right, let's come in and add that next layer. So we're going to be adding the next layers were coming down towards me. I'm going to be adding more yellowish greens to warm my colors up. So as it moves towards me, it's going to get warmer. So I'm going to be starting with a lightish green, a lighter yellow green. Let's come down here so you can see where I'm at. A yellowish green. And I'm going to be adding this on here, and I'm going to come in. This is where I'm going to be coming back and forth. You can add a little bit of hill motion in this as well. Now these are just the beginning of the paper. We're probably not going to see a lot of this in the background. We're just going to see a little. Okay, so I'm moving forward. I'm also going to be adding more paint as I come forward. I'm going to be doing a technique where I'm going to be taking a tool to scratch into my surface and make a dark line that's going to be having some of the grasses or some of the flower stems showing through. So you can even use the belly of your brush sideways because I'm going to have a darker paint. So now I'm going to come in with a stylist with my tippy point here, and I'm going to be scratching in to the surface. And where I'm scratching, that color is going to stay very dark, and it's a fun way to make a texture. So now we're kind of moving into the mixed media realm here. I'm actually damaging my paper technically, but I'm creating a very cool texture. Hopefully you can see it as it's coming on the camera. I want to make sure I'm still going all the way down to the bottom, so it's not just all stopping at one area. So I want to be able to come down there. I'm going to come up into that little bit of that mid-ground as well. I'm going to have this be where all of this is going to help push that mid-ground back by having this detail here. Okay, so we have that part. Let's go ahead and let this dry and see where the next steps are. Look at how cool those little toilet paper clouds are turning out. How fun, right? It's always so interesting how you can create a very interesting look with just some simple materials like toilet paper. Well, let's give this a chance to dry, and I'm going to take a little bit of heat to this, let this all dry, and then we're going to start using our gouache on top of there. So once my paper got dry, I'm going to beef up my mid-ground just a little bit more. I'm going to come in with that greenish, cool shade of green in my background here, and I'm going to just beef it up just a tiny bit more. So I'm going to be coming in and tapping in a little bit darker. I'm going to make sure I have some open areas on my tree line so it's not so solid. And I'm just easily coming in and just wiggling back and forth on my tree line. And I want to have some areas that are coming up so this isn't all even either. Okay, to anchor that tree line, I'm going to come in with that darker color, and I'm going to just come in here and anchor that a little bit and give it like anchor it to the ground. So I'm adding that darker color on there. Now we are probably not going to see a lot of this background, but we know it's there, so we're adding those areas in. I'm also going to come in with a small little brush, and I'm going to pick up a darker bit of that blue, just a tiny darker blue. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the Van Dyke brown, or black in this instance, I guess. I've got kind of an inky consistency there. I'm going to tap it on here. I want a lot of control over these, and I'm going to be laying in some little tree trunks, not a lot, just here and there in that background. It's not going to be my main focus on my picture. I just want to have a little bit of it in there so I can kind of see it. It's going to soften a little bit because my paper is still wet back there, but they're not going to be the stars of the show. My flowers are going to be the stars of the show. So we're going to give that a chance to dry, and then we're going to start working on the gouache. Now you could almost stop here and have a great looking picture of like some tall grass, and maybe this would be a water. You could add a little bit more blue in that and capture that as being water. So you could have a simple little landscape just like this. But I'm going to be adding some flowers to mine, so I'm going to be using the gouache. Gouache is a liquid, or is an opaque form of watercolor. It's going to dry very matte, just like watercolor does. That's why sometimes people might ask, like, well, why couldn't you just use acrylic paint? Well, you could use acrylic paint, but it would have a different texture. The opacity would be different with acrylic paint. So gouache is more going to dry. It's going to behave a little differently than acrylic paint. I'm going to use this little scruffy brush right here. It's not a great brush, it's just a little scruffy brush. And I'm going to be tapping directly into my gouache. I'm not going to thin it down at this stage. I'm just going to create a nice little mount on the tip of my brush. And then I'm going to select some areas to be able to pop these little flowers in. I'm looking for some irregular shapes. I like using these little scruffy brushes because they're not going to be perfectly round circles. So I'm just creating these little petal marks or little flowers right on here. Now I'm going to let these dry, and I'm going to be coming back in and adding some watercolor in with my gouache to add a little bit more purple nature to them. So these are the white ones. You could leave them as white and have a really nice picture too, but I'm going to be doing a little bit more colorful. When you're doing this, be mindful that you're not creating kind of just a pattern across your paper. You want to be able to have some randomness to it. So be mindful of that when you're popping in these little spots, so it doesn't end up with just polka dot, polka dot, polka dot. All right, now I'm going to be adding a little bit of sprinkleness of this color as well. So I'm going to take the gouache and I'm going to add some water to it now, and I'm going to thin it down. So I'm thinning this down, and now I'm going to add the sprinkle quality to it. I'm going to cover up that sky so I don't end up with a lot of white dots in there. So I want to cover that up, so just to protect it a little bit. And I'm going to be adding this over the top as a masking to it. And then I'm going to come in and just tap this. It's going to be a nice little filler. I'm going to be adding some color to this gouache too, so I'm going to have a little bit more color to it. So now that was the white. I'm going to go over and I'm going to pick up a little bit of this red here and make kind of like a pink gouache. So I'm just going to take that, so you can color your gouache too. And I'm going to have this lovely shade of pink here, and I'm going to add some of that on. This is going to dry nice and opaque. So this is like little pretty pink flowers in the background. I'm also going to be taking a little bit, I'm going to put a little bit of orange in there too. So I'm going to take that color and I'm going to add a little bit of orange to it and come up with a new color. So it's kind of a peachy kind of color, and let's add that as another color. I do want to add some yellow in here. I should have did that at first. Yellow is kind of one of those lighter colors. Let's see if I can't add a little bit more gouache to my palette. I don't think I can get a very good yellow out of that, what I have mixed. Let's see. Let's take this. Have this sitting off to the side. A little bit of that. And let's take a little bit of this brighter yellow and see what I can come up with. Now I just dipped into my watercolor, and I shouldn't have done that because now I've contaminated my little watercolor packet. I'm gonna have to remember to wipe that out. Okay, so this is kind of a bright yellow that I'm going to be adding in there. Oh, I like that look. I think that looks great. All right, I want to stop. I don't want to get too carried away with all my splitter splatters. Okay, so I have a good start there. Let's go ahead and let this dry, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add a little bit more watercolor to it. As a layer, I'm going to be adding some more color back on to my, on top of those white spots. So I'm going to be making it, I'm going to do that dance in between adding color, taking away color. I'm going to thin this down because I have all my dots like on top of my white. So I want to be able to push those little dots a little bit farther back. So I'm going to be coming in and adding a little bit of dark purple in some areas over my white spots. And then I'm going to be coming back in with the gouache and layering over a little bit over top of that. So this is going to be creating kind of an underneath shadow of purple. It's probably going to remind you a little bit of mixed media, how we do that dance of putting layers down, covering them up. But it's super fun to create this way. Hopefully you'll give it a try. The gouache, I believe I just bought at my local Michael's store. And the paper, the Strathmore paper, I just purchased that at my local Walmart store. Okay, so I have my little purple area in there. Now I'm going to go back and add my gouache. Gouache you can re-wet, so it doesn't have to just be fresh out of the tube. It kind of reacts a little bit like watercolor, how you can add some water to it and make it come back to reconstitute it and be able to use it. And that's what I'm doing over here, is adding a little bit of water to it. Now let's go ahead and tap some of this over it. It's going to kind of pick up my purple, and it's going to make a really kind of a pretty shade of lavender, which I like. So I can still see some of that dark color underneath, but I'm adding that twinkle or that little bit of bright over top of it. Now after you put this on and it dries, if you feel like you need to bring even more of that white back, let it dry, and then you can come back in and add even another layer of the bright white, which I might do on this one. Okay, let's let that sit. I want to add some more green, so I'm going to be working a little bit on my green grasses now. I'm going to be wanting to work in this Hauser green color, more of a yellowish green. I'm going to be adding more pigment, so I'm not going to have very much water on here. I'm using a pretty small brush. This one's just probably doesn't even have a number on it. It's wore off. It's not an expensive brush, but I'm going to be taking a thicker color. I'm using just kind of a smaller brush tip, but a nice round tip. And I'm going to be adding some more grasses here. So I'm definitely going to be connecting my flowers down, and I'm going to be stroking up. I'm coming from my bottom of my picture and then adding up. So heavier pressure here, and then getting lighter with my pressure as I'm pulling. And this is adding some more depth to my picture. So I don't want everything to be on the same level. So I want to add this layer in so I can bring this all forward and it doesn't look like it's all the same. So darker color, warmer green, and that's going to bring my flowers forward. And it's going to put those little dots kind of in the background and amongst the flowers, instead of being right in the very front. But I can still see my scratching that I did earlier. It's still underneath there. Just giving my brush a little bit of a flick and creating that nice whimsical, or not whimsical, but loose line work with my brush. This one's going to even be darker. Okay, when you get to that point of like, do I have enough? Should I stop? I'm going to say stop, let it dry, and then come back in and take a look at it. Walk away from your work if you need to, so you can get a better eye of what you're doing, and then come back. I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to go any farther, but you can see how that added that little extra depth of going all the way back. So let's take the tape off and see what we have. Now, when you remove this tape, you definitely want to make sure you're pulling it at an angle. So pulling it back on itself, pulling it at an angle is going to help so you won't be ripping your paper. So hopefully the fuzzing helped, and that will help so that you don't rip your paper. It's coming off nice and clean. My edge looks great. If you need to put a little bit of heat on it, you could do that as well to help release it. But the fuzziness, the fuzzing that I had done earlier on my paper is really helping so that it's coming up pretty easily. Okay, nice clean line. I think it looks great. How much fun is that? That little simple drawing, or not drawing, but painting. We didn't do any drawing today. I'm going to go ahead and sign my name, and since this is dark, I'm going to be doing it in my Uniball pen. That'll show up. If I did it in pencil, it wouldn't show up. So that will work perfectly. I think that looks great. Okay, this is that one. I love the clouds on there. Love the little background in there. I think it looks wonderful. And this is the very first one I did. It looks completely different. They're never going to look the same twice, but it sure is fun to try them. You might want to consider when you do yours is to do more than one at a time. Take your paper, I was using just a half sheet is what I was using of mine, but you simply could take your sheet and divide it, tape it off into half, and do 2 at a time. And then you'll be working them. They're each going to look differently, but you can do 2 at one time. Do them more than once. They're super fun to create. Well, that is just about it for today. I did want to mention that I do have a Ko-fi page. Ko-fi is just very similar to what Patreon is. Normally on Painting Crafty, we're drawing and then painting. And this is where I host my sketchbook subscription to have all the line drawings on there. You can become a member there, very reasonably priced, a monthly fee. Come on over there, support my channel. If you found value to hear today, go ahead and consider subscribing to my page. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Give me a thumbs up. YouTube loves thumbs up. If you have a question, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And as well as if you would like to get notifications when I have a next video up, click the bell because then YouTube will send you a notification of when I go live. Oh, too, I wanted to point out, I do have a Facebook page, Painting Crafty, and you'll always see a post with this, whatever we're doing in YouTube that week. And if you do one and you would like to share it, put it underneath there. I love to share other people's work because I believe it doesn't have to look like mine to be good. We all have different ideas and we want to celebrate the joy of creating and we want to see your things too. So if you don't mind sharing, come on over there and share away. I love to share your work. Well, thanks everyone for joining me and hope you'll come back and see me again and let's create some more.